Well, I know some of you are tired. Some of you have been working all day. Some of you have been down fitting things onto boats and all of that type of stuff. But it's good to come together on the Erev. At the beginning of the day. This is not the end of the day. This is the beginning of the day. This Erev of Jewish New Year, Rosh HaShanah, the day of the blowing of trumpets. I want to speak briefly with you on an important subject, a subject which is still with us this very night. I want to speak with you about Yishmael making sport. Yishmael making sport, the issue of the ages. We are informed in the book of Bimidbar that Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets, which is only one of the 4 new years of our faith, but which the rabbis made the beginning of our civil year as opposed to the 1st of Nisan, which is the beginning of months of our spiritual and religious year. We are informed by Bimidbar that this is a day for remembering. More than this, we are not told, but the Torah portion for this festival are interesting because they tie in with the one event which all of our festivals recall. That is, of course, the going out from Egypt. Although the lifetime of our mother Sarah predated the exile in Egypt, there is no doubt that the prophecy which Hashem gave to Abraham concerning his offspring and their sojourning in that land for 400 years would have been something of which she was acutely aware. Thus there is an irony in the fact that she, in a fit of panic over the promised offspring, should have sought to intervene in the matter by giving her servant girl Hagar to her husband. Because Hagar, as we are aware, was an Egyptian. The destinies of these two peoples where it would appear destined to be intended to be interlinked. And until the present day, the issue of Egypt is of special significance to our nation, as we shall see. The much vaunted and talked about and panicked over victory of the Muslim Brotherhood in that land is not the herald of hostility between Israel and Egypt that many fear it to be. There may, of course, be some short-term aggression and even attempts at attack, but the Egyptians are destined to throw off the yoke of Ishmael, which is upon them partly due to Sarah's erroneous decision in the matter of Hagar. The Torah forbids us to despise the Egyptians because we were strangers in their land. In fact, the Egyptians themselves were hospitable to us. It was only after the Hyksos, who were a tribe of the Hittites, invaded and conquered Egypt that the persecution began. They intermarried with the Egyptians and began a new Egypt in which hatred of Israel's children became dominant. The prophet Yeshayahu in chapter 19 speaks of a day of trouble for Egypt, which will bring them into conflict with Israel and result in them seeking Hashem and being joined with his people Israel. This will require the removal of the Ishmael principle from Egypt. Ishmael being the father of the Arab peoples, and in a very real way, even if physically indirectly, the father of the system of Islam. It is interesting that the reference to the unruly and blasphemous man who was stoned to death in Vayikra 24 verse 10 was the child of an Israelite woman and an Egyptian man. So also Ishmael is the son of the Egyptian Hagar and Abraham Avinu, our father. But the resulting offspring was corrupted. It comes as a great surprise to people, especially people from a Christian background, to hear us Jews say that Ishmael had certain rights under the covenant to which he was entitled. And our rabbis make note of them. They note that he had the sign of circumcision, which gave him certain rights to the land and to the God of Abraham. These rights are still the cause of angst to this very day. Ishmael wants the land. He wants the rights of Yitzhak, but he early rejected Abraham's God. In Bereshit 28, Genesis 28 verse 9, we read that the rebellious Esau, when he saw that marrying the pagan women around his family displeased his parents, went to Ishmael and married his daughter. This was a double blow to Yitzhak, because not only was Ishmael his half-brother and his bitterest enemy, but he was already a worshipper of pagan gods, undoubtedly the gods of his Egyptian mother. Bereshit 21 verse 12 makes it clear that Ishmael's rights under the covenant were dependent on his keeping the covenant, and that required something which he was unwilling to accept. That the covenant was with Yitzhak. Yitzhak was the son of promise, the one born through divine intervention and against all the odds. Yitzhak was the son through trusting faithfulness, and Ishmael was the son of the flesh. Ishmael knew this. He realized that his father was already an elderly man, that his father's wife was already past the age of childbearing. He was undoubtedly aware of the promise of God to Abraham and Sarah, and he knew that Yitzhak was its fulfillment. Yet we find him far from ready to accept his younger brother's position. Instead, Sarah saw him sporting. The word used means to laugh. It is ironically a wordplay on the name Yitzhak. She saw him engaged in sukkek, laughter. And in this context, it was not simple laughter, it was a mocking laughter. Immediately Sarah saw him laughing. She knew that Ishmael posed a grave danger to Yitzhak and thus to his descendants. The hostility between our nation and the nations of the Arabs is not about family or national rivalry. It is about the eternal purposes of Hashem for his world, which can only be realized through the offspring of Yitzhak, the Jewish people. Many, many times we've asked ourselves, many times we've been asked, why is it the world hates the Jewish people? Why is it that the brother of the Hamas prime minister can be treated in an Israeli hospital for a serious condition, and just days later his brother is calling again for the destruction of the state of Israel? Why is it? What is it? What is it makes a young Arab girl whose life is saved by Israeli doctors go back to the same hospital just weeks later and blow herself up in order to kill Jews? What is it? What is it makes a man like Adolf Hitler, a nothing, a failed painter, rise to prominence and dominance in Germany through the popular vote, mind you, on a platform of ridding Germany of Jews? What is it? What is it about us? What is it we have done worse than any other people that deserves this hatred? It's not about what we have done. It's about what Hashem desires to do. What Yishmael did was to attack the God of heaven. He opposed Hashem's desires, and he set about seeking to overthrow his purposes. Thus, having been to his thinking, rejected by God, Ishmael turned to other gods. Make no mistake about it. Ishmael had a claim under the covenant, but he left the covenant. That was the problem. The idea which has gained ground in some branches of our religion that we have much in common with the sons of Ishmael today is a myth. We are told by some of the Haredi, the ultra-orthodox, the people like Neturei Karta and the Satmars, that the Muslims worship the same God as we do. But they simply do not know his name, so they call him by the Arabic for God. That's not true. That is untrue. It is dishonest. It is an untruth. It is a lie. For it to be true would require that their God is the God of the patriarchs and matriarchs. And therefore, continuity could be established between the God of Abraham and the God they serve today. A God who apparently instructs them to carry out a worldwide jihad by the sword or the gun or the bomb, and who is glorified in the murder of the innocent. In order for us to believe that the God they worship is the same God as we worship, that continuity between this God who instructs them to overthrow nations and destroy people, that there's a continuity between him and the God our father Abraham worshipped. Not only does no such continuity exist, but archaeologists have uncovered temples to the moon god throughout the Middle East. The sun may have been regarded as the main god, the male god by the Babylonians, but the rest of the region saw the moon as male and the sun as a female. From the mountains of Turkey to the banks of the Nile, the most widespread religion of the ancient world was the worship of the moon god. His symbol can be seen today on the minarets throughout our nation, throughout Europe, throughout the Middle East. It was the crescent moon. The Semitic peoples of Chaldea called him Sin. The sun goddess was the wife of Sin, and the stars were their daughters. For example, Ishtar was a daughter of Sin. You know who Ishtar is? She's the goddess who gave her name to Easter. Sacrifices to the moon god are described in the past Shamra texts. The book of Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 19, forbids the worship of this particular god family. In Arabia, votive bowls used in worship of the daughters of Allah have been discovered. That's the inscription on these bowls. Ancient bowls, far, far predating the rise of Islam. Bowls used in the worship of the daughters of Allah. The three daughters, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat, are sometimes depicted together with Allah, the moon god, represented by a crescent moon above them. The archaeological evidence demonstrates that the dominant religion of Arabia was the cult of the moon god. According to numerous inscriptions, while the name of the moon god was Sin, his title was Al-La, that is, the deity, meaning that he was the chief or the high god among the gods. As Professor Kuhn pointed out, the god Il or Ilah was originally a phase of the moon god. The moon god was called Al-Ilah, the god, which was shortened to Allah in pre-Islamic times. The pagan Arabs even used Allah in the names they gave to their children. For example, both Muhammad, you listen to your television and you have heard in the last few days the controversy about this film, and the newsreaders always say, because it's perceived as an insult to the Prophet Muhammad. He wasn't a prophet. We shouldn't refer to him as the Prophet Muhammad. Both Muhammad's father and uncle had Allah as part of their names. What Muhammad did was to gather this Godhead. Remember, in Judaism we have no Godhead. The reference in the book of Colossians to a Godhead is an attack by Rabbi Shaul, as if you remember from our studies in Colossians, an attack by Rabbi Shaul on the pagan Gnostic concept of a Godhead. In Judaism we don't have a Godhead, we have a God, the God. But what Muhammad did was he gathered together all the various deities of this Godhead in one, and he created a single religion based around the chief deity of Arabia and assimilated all the other deities into him. It was ingenious. It was ingenious because these early Islamic Arabian tribes were still able to worship their own tribal deities in Allah. But it still does not make the God of Islam the same God as the one whom Abraham worshipped. This is the great problem of our generation, as it has been since the days that the two sons of Abraham were born. And it will continue until the greatest of Abraham's children, Mashiach Yeshua, returns in power and glory to deliver Israel. But lest we focus only on the external danger of our near but estranged relatives, let us take note on this Yom Teruah, this day of remembering, that as Ishmael began in the covenant, so have we. And as he left the covenant to his utter and final destruction, so might we. Even a Jew must choose to be Jewish. Even a Jew must choose the Torah. Even a Jew must choose the God of Abraham. Rabbi Shaul makes a drash in Galatians based on this passage. There he is dealing with the issue of the means of salvation. Does it consist in Torah keeping or in trust? That's actually what the burden of the book of Galatians is about. Many people have used it to say, you see, he's doing away with circumcision. Well, we don't have time to deal with that issue in depth, but simply to say, if he was dealing with circumcision, he's a false prophet. If he's doing away with circumcision, he's abolishing God's own words. In fact, he's not doing anything of the sort, but he's addressing the issue of where's your trust? Is your trust in your circumcision, or is your trust in the Mashiach? So this drash which he makes cannot make Judaism redundant, as some have argued, because Rabbi Shaul is using Yerushalayim to illustrate two opposing systems. Someone said, you see, there you go. There's Yerushalayim, the Torah, in bondage. That's not what he is saying at all. Read the passage carefully again. He is using Jerusalem to illustrate two opposing systems. Legalism, on the one hand, in which the keeping of Torah brings personal salvation, and the eternal world, where we live Torah because we are free. According to the oral tradition of which he was acutely aware, the Talmud states in Tanat 5 that God swore that he would not enter Jerusalem above, that is, the heavenly Jerusalem or the spiritual Jerusalem, until he enters Jerusalem below. Jerusalem below is the gate, it says, to Jerusalem above. God's palace below is the gate to God's palace above. Thus Rabbi Shaul concludes in verse 26 of Galatians 4, Jerusalem above is the mother of us all. But they argue, you see, he's saying Jerusalem below is in bondage with her children. That's the Torah. That's not what he argues. He argues that the bondswoman is Hagar, who is representative of the system of legalism, which by that time, in the days of the first century, had become predominant within the religion of our people. And so he is attacking this system of legalism, which he says is the same system which Hagar brought into the world, or Hagar brought into the family. Hagar is said to symbolize the corruption of the Torah into the system of legal snares, whereas Sarah symbolizes freedom found in the true system of Torah in Jerusalem above. Therein lies the danger. Ishmael chose his own path and abandoned Hashem's. But he's not alone in this danger. The path of Torah is narrow and hard, and without the door Yeshua, we will never find it. So in the words of our Mashiach, at this season of our self-examination, which begins tonight, if we haven't already begun it, strive to enter in at the narrow gate, For many will seek to enter and will not be able. For we are not the children of the bondwoman, but of the free. B'Shem Yeshua. Amen. Of our faith, but which the rabbis made the beginning of our civil year as opposed to the 1st of Nisan, which is the beginning of months of our spiritual and religious year. We are informed by B'midbar that this is a day for remembering. More than this, we are not told, but the Torah portion for this festival are interesting because they tie in with the one event which all of our festivals. Well, I know some of you are tired. Some of you have been working all day. Some of you have been down fitting things onto boats and all of that type of stuff. But it's good to come together on the Erev. At the beginning of the day. This is not the end of the day. This is the beginning of the day. This Erev of Jewish New Year, Rosh HaShanah, the day of the blowing of trumpets. I want to speak briefly with you. Festivals recall, that is of course the going out from Egypt. Although the lifetime of our mother Sarah predated the exile in Egypt, there is no doubt that the prophecy which Hashem gave to Abraham concerning his offspring and their sojourning in that land for 400 years would have been something of which she was acutely aware. Thus there is an irony in the fact that she, in a fit of panic over the promise on an important subject, a subject which is still with us this very night. I want to speak with you about Yishmael making sport. Yishmael making sport, the issue of the ages. We are informed in the book of B'midbar that Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets, which is only one of the 4 New Year's offspring, should have sought to intervene in the matter by giving her servant girl Hagar to her husband, because Hagar, as we are aware, was an Egyptian. The destinies of these two peoples were, it would appear, destined to be, intended to be interlinked. And until the present day, the issue of Egypt is of special significance to our nation, as we shall see. The much vaunted and